Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please keep enjoying your salads and your meals. We're going to get started here with the program for a little bit. First, I want to thank the IID for sponsoring the dinner tonight. So could we have a warm applause for the IID sponsoring this? And we have a short video that we would like you to see presented by the IID. So.
For more than a decade, the Imperial Irrigation District has taken steps to promote the growth of the renewable energy industry within its service area.
Imperial Irrigation District is doing a number of things in today's world to support the renewable development within Imperial Valley. One, we've changed our mission. Our mission used to be just serving our load, but now it's serving our load with renewables because of the RPS requirement. But the other portion of that mission is how do we support the renewable development, help them get it to market. Well, that's twofold. One, we've got to have the strategy for transmission build out to have the capacity to open up markets for them. One of the things that we're doing now is we're looking at those capacities and how to get energy to market. Our board has recently approved the build out of Path 42 from Coachella Valley to Mirage Devers. We're looking at the beefing up of the S-line out to Imperial Valley Sub from the steam plant back here. We're putting in what we would call a partial PTO, which will be a way to interconnect out by IV Sub, which will facilitate the interconnection process of renewables in that area out there. The other thing that we're doing is we're looking at the subscription from the Cal ISO and realizing that that's only one market. What we're doing is looking at the other markets that could be out there. We're obviously working with the public agencies in the LA area, looking to see if there's a market to get them down here. We're talking with APS, and we will be talking with SRP and WAPA about going east and creating paths east so that we can create a market to the east. And then we've already met with CFE, and we're looking at creating transmission or building transmission interfacing to the south so that there's a market down there.
But IID is committed to more than transmission and production of renewable energy. IID is committed to economic development in the region.
Look at economic development as a investment rather than an expenditure. Obviously, we want to work with developers. We want to create jobs down here. We have a high 30% unemployment rate in the area. And to the extent that we can get development in here and other economic solutions in here, we create jobs. People can actually go home with a paycheck. We are really supportive of that. I'm actually creating a position inside the IID to work on economic development.
Renewable energy has come a long way in a decade, and if trends are correct, we will continue to see a decrease in renewable energy costs and an increase in its popularity and efficiency in the coming years.
That's a great video. And the IID is a great partner in bringing renewable energy, and a necessary partner along with the county in bringing these projects to fruition. Now I'd like to bring up Mr. Kevin Kelly. He's the general manager of the Imperial Irrigation District. I know, Kevin, you're probably eating, but we're going to bother you to bring you up here. Kevin Kelly is a native of Raleigh, California, and I won't hold that against you, Kevin. I'm from Imperial, and for those of you out of the area, Imperial and Raleigh have a natural competition in football, which is big down here, so I won't hold it against you. But he's a lifelong resident of the Imperial Valley, and he's an '84 graduate of the University of Southern California, so there's others of you that probably shouldn't hold it against him if you went to UCLA. He majored in communications, arts, and sciences. Kelly's background in media consulting, marketing communications, and public affairs is wide-ranging and extensive. He is the former editor and publisher of the Valley Growers Magazine, an agricultural trade publication that was acquired by the Imperial Valley Press in 2003. As a freelance writer, his work has appeared in most major metropolitan newspapers in the West, and from 2005 to 2006, he served as editorial page editor of the Imperial Valley Press. Recruited to the Imperial Irrigation District in June 2006 to lead IID's public affairs and communications efforts, Kelly was named general manager in May 2011. Please welcome Kevin Kelly.
Well, thank you, Mark, for the world's most tedious introduction. No, I'm just kidding. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, but before I do, I want to compliment IID on that short testimonial to Carl Stills. Actually, I do want to commend Mr. Stills. I'm sure many of you heard him today, and you will hear, I think, from our speaker that he has been a tremendous addition to IID in his new capacity as energy manager. So a word about our speaker. I do know a number of semi-humorous anecdotes about him, but they would be humorous only to me, and they would only embarrass him. I can tell you that in his role as California's renewable energy czar for not just this governor, but the one who preceded him, that he has distinguished himself as an innovator and a very smart man who came up through the political ranks and is now a policy wonk. So I will tell you that he served as deputy treasurer in the California State Treasurer's Office in 1999. He was chief of staff for then Sacramento Mayor Joe Cerna from 1991 to 1998. In the period between 1982 and 1991, he co-founded an environmental consulting business, the Toxics Assessment Group, and helped organize the Toxics Coordinating Project, a statewide nonprofit coalition of environmental, farm, labor, and neighborhood groups that framed local and statewide policy on toxics hazards in California. So it was actually quite a career move for our speaker to move from toxic materials to renewable energy. From 1980 to 1982, he worked as a deputy assistant for toxic substances control under Governor Jerry Brown. That was the first time around, and helped establish new hazardous waste facility siting and management programs that are now part of the Department of Toxic Substances Control. He has lived in Sacramento for over 35 years, earned a master's degree in business administration from the University of California, Davis, and got his bachelor's in English from Immaculate Heart College Please join me in welcoming Michael Picker.
I promise that I will try not to get terribly wonky in my remarks. I have a slideshow, however, so I'm going to force you to look at images. And this is my clicker. Has anybody been to Coalinga lately? One person. I mean, when you drive into Coalinga, you'll go through the old oil production fields, and you see the pumps still working, and you see some historical pumps that aren't working. And then as you get into town past West Hills College, you start to see the solar panels at the granite laydown yards, and they're pretty extensive. I think they're using a lot of power there for something. But then you look further over the horizon and you see something really bright. And what it is Bright Source's solar thermal facility. They beam the rays of the sun from a 15-acre field of mirrors on a giant collector, and it heats water. And they pump that water into the ground to liquefy the heavy crudes in some of the older oil fields so that they're easier and cheaper to lift to the surface. And so you get the sense that there's a change taking place in how we produce power here in California. You're no longer burning natural gas to enhance oil production. We're using solar to provide electricity for construction firms. And then you go into town, and people are pretty excited. They've actually resurfaced the streets. A lot of the older downtown has been painted, and there's a new Starbucks. And when I go to the Starbucks, people swear that it's related to the solar panels and the Bright Source facility. I have a hard time believing that, but that sense of newness and replenishment comes together for them. And I think we're seeing that in other parts of the state of California. And it's been actually a fairly remarkable experience for me. 4 years ago, I had no real experience in the power industry. I didn't know a whole great deal about the structure of the marketplace. All I knew is that we were going to try to build a lot of large renewable energy projects to be able to create jobs here in California. So I'll try to show you some slides. Here we go. So can you see the numbers on this? Is it all visible to folks here? I'll interpret a little bit. When I started 4 years ago, people made me go to conference after conference after conference where the panels of distinguished experts explained why it was impossible to build renewable energy projects in California. You know, CEQA, community opposition, the challenge of simply building the large projects. So 3.5 years later, we have permitted 19 gigawatts of large renewable energy projects in the state of California. That's the total at the far. There are 2 power plants at San Onofre, each of them about a gigawatt. So this is roughly the equivalent of 19 new nuclear power plants. And it's a remarkable success, and there's a couple things I just want to talk about before I go on to explain it. These are just projects that have been permitted. Not all of them will get built, but it's not because we couldn't get them through California's land use and regulatory processes. If they fail in the marketplace, they fail in the utility procurement process, it is not because of our bureaucracy. I want to talk a little bit about this totals on the side down here by the counties. If you look, Kern is actually responsible for about 8,000 megawatts out of this 19,000 megawatts. And that's partly because they prepared for this a long time ago. They actually mapped the resource. They worked hard to get the transmission infrastructure in place. They developed a very good planning program that actually was prepared, had a map, said go here, don't go here. If you come here, you're going to impinge on it in military airspace, and we're going to sit down and talk to you before you go any further. But I also want to point out that number 2 in this is Imperial County with about 3,500 megawatts. And I think that there's a lot of important attributes. You have good resources. You have a community that was eager for jobs. I think you wanted to diversify your economy. You had transmission infrastructure in place, the Sunrise Power Link. But I also think you had other essential components. You have a very good county government that set direction and made it a high priority for the planning department to be an aid as opposed to an obstacle, to find the right places and to help people build good projects that provided jobs, that provide clean energy, that help clean up our air, and fit within the community's values. But I also have to say that the IID has really been an important part of that. And so I want to just kind of, again, thank Kevin Kelly for his work as the general manager. He's built a good transmission and energy division. Carl Stills is a great interim manager. Jamie Asbury is really effective. Every Monday at 1 o'clock, I am on a conference call with Jamie and Carl and other members of the IID staff. And there are anywhere from 10 to 40 people on the call representing large renewable energy developers who chose to make their projects work here in Imperial County. And I'd like to ask all those people who are on that phone call, if any of you are still here, just raise your hand so people have a sense of how many people are engaged with your staff, with Andy Horn from the county and with the team from IID to make this transition. So I want to thank all of you for what you're doing for the state of California. I want to thank you for what you're doing for our future generations. It makes me very proud to see this kind of progress in such a short period of time here in the state of California. We actually said we were going to do it, and we're going to do it. This number means that we will get to 33% of our electricity from renewable sources pretty darn quick, before 2020. So I'm going to give you some other data points. But I do want to point out here that if you look at the different technologies that are represented, photovoltaic is pretty heavy. Geothermal is pretty light. We'll come back to some of the challenges that come with this kind of success. This is something that they are very proud of in Kern County. This is the space shuttle on its way to LA to become part of the museum. It's flying over 2 projects in construction in Kern County. One is the Pacific Wind Project. You can see the wind vanes up on the upper right part of the picture. And then you can see some of the blocks of solar being installed for Catalina Solar down at the bottom. I don't know why NASA just got their damn plane in the way, but they obviously thought that it was important to show this new industry here in California. That's how significant the transition is, that we become part of a larger model of the future for other parts of the country. This is simply a representation of the number of contracts that have been approved or under consideration, or that are yet to come to the PUC for approval. And basically, as you can see, it goes above the 33% goal. So it's likely that we will, from the PUC's perspective, we won't have a hard time reaching our 33% goal. And frankly, if the survival rate for these projects, as we're starting to hear from the utilities, is greater than the failure rate that they set, we will cruise past 33% by 2020. Here's the CAISO. The CAISO is actually pretty sure that they can connect at least 33% with the existing infrastructure and some additional projects that are currently underway. But here's one of the problems. We have too much damn electricity. Now, I suspect that this is probably an overstatement. I think that a couple staff people at the PUC had their thumb on the scale. But if our all-time peak electrical demand was around 55 gigawatts, look how much electricity we have. And the challenge is, can we buy more electricity when we have so much? Now, I will say that people here in Imperial have gone further than anybody else in the state of California. You are actually the first community to build a renewable power generator that is selling to those poor people in eastern states right along our border who haven't been able to build renewables projects. So hats off to Larry Grogan. I haven't seen him here, but he actually has a contract in Arizona to sell his power. You'll also notice, however, that the supply starts to drop off by 2018, and that's the closure of Korean War-era natural gas plants up and down the coast. And so, since it does take a while to propose, to get permits for, to finance, and to build a plant, we probably will see demand for new power projects start to come back. But I will say that there's a glut. And there's particularly a glut of renewables projects. We did too much, too fast. We did too damn good. So shame on you. You were not supposed to succeed. I'm just going to point to another challenge that comes with success here. This is what people are calling the seahorse chart or the duck chart. And again, it may overstate the case, but what it tells us a little bit is that because we have so much PV and we have so much wind, we don't have a complete portfolio. A lot of the resources tend to go off at a certain time of the day. And I don't, it's a big drop, but I don't look at that so much as the steepness of the curve. If you look, not only do they tend to go off all at the same time, the sun goes down, the wind drops off. This is a representation of one day. Different times, different parts of the year are different. Look how steep that curve is where it starts to drop off and we need more power. And the challenge here is that there aren't a lot of technologies that you can turn on and that can respond. So hydro does it. Some natural gas technologies do, not all natural gas. You've got to have a fairly efficient machine with a turbine that can spin up real fast. A lot of them take most of the day. That doesn't work. We have a couple hours. So we're going to have to figure out some of these technological challenges. 3 years ago, I went to lots of conferences and people told me that it was impossible to build renewable energy projects in California. We'd never get to 33%. Now they're making me go back to those same conferences, the same experts get up there and tell me that we won't be able to keep the lights on. And actually, I don't think that they're right about that either. I think that I've sort of discovered that people get paid to go to conferences to be wrong on panels of experts. And I will just point to a couple of things that the CAISO and the CPUC and the CEC are working on. One is the energy imbalance market that you heard about. And so when we looked at those contracts that utilities were signing, these are usually for 30 years. When you go look at this, we don't need something that runs every day at the same time and have to buy it for 30 years. We want to buy it for a couple hours. So how do you go from that kind of a fixed procurement strategy to a market where you can buy just to meet these integration needs? And that's part of what the energy imbalance market can help us to do. Because at different times of the day, the wind is blowing in Montana. So we want to be able to buy that, but we don't want to buy their whole plant when we don't need it all day long. What we find is that there are actually other places in the West who will want slices of our powers on the shoulder of the curve. And so a good example is Las Vegas, which the state of Nevada is very clear has a need for extra power on those hot summer nights when they got the neon just cranking and the air conditioner on in Las Vegas. So there's a value proposition. But this sort of stresses the notion that each state is going to have its own energy policy, and each state is going to be responsible for doing everything, just as we're starting to see those pressures for all utilities. So I just want to mention that. Another example is a shorter-term market where we can pay some power plants that we won't use all the time. I mean, one of the things that happens with potential overgeneration curve here, we have to shut something off. Can't have too much electricity. It starts to melt the wires. But we want it to be there when we do need it. So we're going to have to pay them to keep the capacity to turn on available so that they can turn it on real fast to help us meet those spot needs. And there are ways that you can do that. Additionally, that kind of a market can pay for this demand response you probably heard about. Demand response is a lot of different things, and actually Laura Shane Berland here is from a company that puts together lots of small consumers of electricity to be able to bid to turn off their power, just as if you were turning on a generator. And so there are lots and lots and lots of ways that we can accommodate this. Energy imbalance market, forward capacity mechanism that can pay for capacity for projects or can pay for demand response. So we're all getting more nimble. Now, one of the things that you hear about, of course, over and over and over again is that renewables are a challenge because they're variable. I got to tell you that customers are more variable than they used to be. California used to have manufacturing that ran 24/7, 6 days a week. You need power plants that went up and stayed up and ran 24/7. It means you didn't have to have something that was fast ramping. You could take a couple days to get it up and keep it going, and then Christmas came, you'd turn it down some. Consumers in California are not like that. They are server farms. They are millions of residences, and they are variable themselves. So you put this together, everybody's going to have to become a lot more nimble. It's like marketing or anything else in this era of new technologies. So I want to kind of bring it back to the challenge for IID because you have more resources. You've done very well. The big challenge here will be transmission. Who is your market? What are the resources that they need? How do you get those resources to them? Our experience is that in Kern and Imperial, places where you've thought through the infrastructure, where you've planned where you want to put the plants, and you have teams of people who are working together to get the jobs done in the same way that we get together every week on a phone call that involves me, the Public Utilities Commission on occasion, always the CAISO, a bunch of developers, the utility on the other side of the hill, and frequently our federal partners. That kind of coordination is going to be required more and more and more to make this very flexible system work. It's just harder and harder to contain it in your back pocket. Transmission and that kind of coordination and local planning will continue to make you guys a leader in the state of California and a leader nationally. So I want to thank you for everything that you've done, and I just want to warn you that it doesn't get any easier for having been successful. So congratulations and watch out.
Is there anybody that has any questions for Mr. Picker while we have him here? This is a real coup to have Mr. Picker be able to come down and join us, coming all the way down. So please take the opportunity to ask him any questions you may have tonight. Do we see anybody?
Buy me a beer.
Yeah, you can buy him a beer. We have a gentleman in the back. You'll have to yell.
Peter
No, you got
Fisher.
there. You got one. Okay.
You can talk to me any Monday.
Yes, I know. Well, Michael, first of all, thank you for coming down. We're delighted to have you here, and thank you for that chat. It's a question about storage. Tell us a little bit about what you know about the new technologies in storage that's going to help us, to some degree anyway, with that chart you've got over there.
Well, storage is definitely another piece of it. We don't have a financial structure to really pay for storage, and so forward capacity mechanisms such as the CPUC and CAISO are discussing and working on can help to do that, as well as to buy capacity on these power plants and demand response. So here, I'll just kind of run through what kind of storage technologies are currently available. And so what we really have that's prominent for storage is hydro, pump-back storage. Some people here know that fairly well. It's basically you have a reservoir here and a reservoir here. You run the water out for ag, for fish flows, to avoid floods, and then at night, when power is cheap, pump it back in. It seems kind of futile, but it works really good. And we have about 5,000 megawatts, about 4,695 megawatts of pumped storage already here in California. And it's been working really well. So, for example, when the wind is really ripping in the Pacific Northwest late at night, we can buy it really cheap because they're just dumping it. And we can use it to pump that hydro back uphill and use gravity to produce power. That's here, that's now. There are actually a couple more pump storage opportunities. PG&E has a pump storage facility in the middle of the state, the Helms Powerhouse. It's only operated at half capacity. They need to build some additional transmission. There's a project near Desert Center that is actually permitted by FERC. They're seeking financing and a contract with utilities. They would be about 1,300 megawatts, so that would take us another bump up. And then the utility that I actually am on the board of now in Sacramento, SMUD, is talking about doing a 400 megawatt pump storage facility along the upper reaches of the American River. This works. We understand how it works. It's pretty simple. It's pretty effective. We can maximize some more. Batteries work pretty good too, but they're real expensive. And so you can recharge them, and you can then discharge them. They don't tend to last terribly long currently. They are expensive, but if we continue to see more electric vehicles, whether it's fully electric vehicles or more plug-in hybrids, those are batteries. We can actually teach people how to charge up at night and discharge in the days. The average California drives 40 miles a day, and particularly in places like Sacramento, there's no place to go. And they can go to work and they can feed that power back into the grid. So as we start to see more of that, we'll all of a sudden start to have more nimble customers. If you think that the transition to solar on rooftops is big, wait till everybody has their own battery and figures out they can make money on it. So there's actually compressed air storage, and that people are testing that. Also pretty expensive, not very well known. There are a few other technologies, but I just wanted to kind of paint that picture for you. It's solvable. I don't know that it's going to be the complete answer, but it's definitely within our reach.
Michael, Tim Kelly, Imperial Valley Economic Development. I want to thank you for being here. Yeah, we've had you here several years, and I think that this has been a learning experience for the Imperial Valley. As a matter of fact, that's why our Renewable Energy Conference was formed, was to help educate local elected officials and the community about the renewable energy, and to invite developers to come to the Imperial County. And I think what we're seeing this year is a lot of investment that is coming in Imperial County, and investors that want to invest in these projects. But it's obvious from your presentation that we've been successful. And I think it's very important for us to all hear, the good and the bad and the ugly. We know this hasn't been easy, and sometimes we're our worst enemies. We've tried to work with the state, and the state has implemented the RPS, and at the same time, the state has not always, in some cases, been in the way. In some cases, we've been in the way. But from an outside perspective, we'd like to hear from you about the progress that we've made. And I know that you've worked with the county, you've worked with the IID, and I can tell you firsthand, I've seen such great improvements. But as I travel throughout the state, and I talk to other counties, they're watching Imperial County to see what we do, and then they follow. And so can you kind of just give us that outside perspective on what you're experiencing in other parts of the state? And once again, I want to just stop by saying I really appreciate you being here.
Well, I don't like to speak poorly of the political subdivisions of the state of California, but I got to point to San Bernardino and Riverside County. And you would think that given the transmission infrastructure, the equivalent or even more superior resources, solar and wind that they have, that they would show up more strongly in this chart. So Kern, 8,000 megawatts, Imperial, 3,500 megawatts, Riverside's only gotten permits for 2,400 megawatts, and San Bernardino has only got permits for about 1,665 megawatts of large-scale renewable energy. And so I'll just go back to what you've really done well. And that's to essentially buckle down to the task. You did not have a utility that was designed to export electricity. It was designed to import electricity, primarily for your pumps for water, and then to serve about 80,000 residents. All of a sudden, now you're actually trying to move electrons the other direction. And you're trying to be a balancing authority that's exporting power. And so you needed a different staff. So aside from the work that the county did to actually plan the right places and to work with people on permitting and to actually make the projects better so that they would be acceptable to the community and within the laws of the state of California, I think that a significant success that you guys have had is that you were able to change the essential course and function of a utility. You recruited a very effective staff, and they have built transmission interconnections. They're building bays and substations. They're now upgrading Path 42. But you've got a tough challenge ahead of you in terms of actually pushing out a fairly significant large transmission line to take a much bigger resource that you can develop to the rest of the state and the rest of the country. That will not be easy. And so, I think that you'll have to experiment. I don't know that you have the assets within your ratepayer base to finance it. You may have to find partners. And that's a tough thing to do. Because as I've learned from being on the board of the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, public power agencies essentially have always avoided that kind of a relationship because it makes it harder for them to protect their consumers. So I wish you luck, but I think that's a significant challenge that you guys will face, and actually I'm kind of confident that you'll figure out how to do it. So that would be the biggest things that I would say. You've already done so well, and you've got so many of the key things in place. This next one's going to be a real challenge. And I will be glad to help, but I think that it really is a series of community choices, and there's different ways you can choose to go, but I think it's a community-wide choice that you have to make. So good luck. Mr. Vincent?
What does geothermal need to forget geothermal ideas and we're
The question was, what do we need to do to really help geothermal to progress? And I think that the answer is, I'll be damned if I know. I am still to this day stunned that nobody has signed a contract for the Cal Energy projects. It just does not make sense. Now, I'll tell you that some of the blame is on the state's part. We don't really value the resources that come with a technology like geothermal, that it can run 24/7, that it actually, it doesn't, as Bob Weissenmiller pointed out, it doesn't ramp up. When you get it up, it stays up. But, we can use it, and we want it, but we don't value it. What happens is the staff at the Public Utilities Commission currently just looks at price. And that's why you see so much PV. Now, you guys shouldn't complain. You guys shouldn't complain because you're cleaning up on PV. But this is one of the general choices that you will have to make, is that if you want to emphasize that and you want to devote more of your expanded transmission infrastructure to geothermal, you're probably going to have to ramp back on other technologies. And so I think that the state needs to figure out how to help you value that. And I think Carla mentioned that she's actually working on a policy that helps to value integration better. I think we all recognize that that's a challenge. But I got to tell you that since people kept telling me we couldn't even get these projects permitted, much less built, I didn't think about what was going to happen in 3 years when we actually surpassed our own expectations. So some of it's a lack of vision and experience on my part, and I'm sorry that I didn't do better. But there's also a problem with the utilities. They don't seem to like it as much as you would think. Maybe that's because they have nukes, but I don't know. So we'll see how that works out. So I wish I had a better answer for you, Steve. I really do. But I think you're right to point it out, and that's one of the values of bringing all of us down here, because you dragged a lot of high state officials who are smarter than me down here and brought me down here, and we can't be working on fixing the problem with geothermal while we're all down here. So, but you can remind us that it's our responsibility to think about those things. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. I know it's a travel for all the state officials to come down here, and we really appreciate you being here. And we also really appreciate all the work you've done to help us get to where we're at, to be more successful than anybody thought we could be. And so we hope that you will continue to help us do that and be more successful, which helps not only us, but also the state. And so with that, that ends our program for this evening. So I hope you've had your dessert. Tomorrow we have 2 workshops. One is on the Salton Sea in the morning, and then one is on geothermal. I also want to remind you that there are tickets available for the Blue Angels Air Show on Saturday. So if you would like to partake of that, please see the girls at the registration desk in the back. They have some tickets available. Okay, so thank you to all of our speakers today for being here. We've had a very full day. We've learned a lot today, and we appreciate all of you for being here and taking part in this, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.